Dear Chosen One, they say you're too much to be loved, that your presence is too intense, your truth too sharp, your discernment too uncomfortable. But what they really mean is, you can't be controlled. The world has always tried to name your power as a problem. They called you cold when you were just discerning, called you arrogant when you were just awake, and labeled you hard to love when you simply refused to accept fake affection. You weren't rejected because you were unworthy. You were rejected because your soul carried a light that exposed everything they weren't ready to face. That's why you need to stay right here, because this isn't just about a painful phrase people kept throwing at you. This is spiritual warfare disguised as emotional rejection. The enemy knows that if he can convince a chosen one that they are unlovable, he can silence their mission, break their spirit, and twist their truth. That lie, "You're too much," is an ancient weapon used to dim divine lights like yours. And if you've ever found yourself shrinking just to be accepted, this message is your wake-up call. Because today, we're going to tear that lie apart. Throughout this video, you'll begin to see that it was never about love. It was about power. Your clarity, your ability to see through the illusion. And the people who said they couldn't handle you, they weren't rejecting your love. They were terrified of your light. So stay with me until the very end, because I promise, what you'll hear today can change everything. Leave a like, subscribe, and drop this in the comments. I refuse to shrink to be loved. This is your moment of reversal, where the truth finally sets your soul free. From a very young age, you noticed something different. People treated you with caution, distance, or even subtle resentment, and you couldn't understand why. You weren't cruel. You weren't arrogant. You were just aware. You sensed things you were never taught. You saw patterns no one else wanted to admit. And because you didn't play along with the emotional games, they started calling you difficult, too serious, too intense. But what really happened is that your spirit couldn't be seduced by small talk and shallow love. You were born with a vibration that unsettles the fake, and that made you a target before you even understood your own power. The truth is, your strength became a mirror, and people don't always like what they see in it. You didn't conform. You didn't perform. You didn't shrink into what others wanted you to be. And instead of honoring that, they punished you for it. Every time you stood in your truth, someone called it too much. Every time you chose integrity over approval, they labeled it pride. But that's not pride. It's sacred alignment. And they knew that. Deep down, they saw something in you that they hadn't yet activated within themselves. And that scared them. Because if they admitted your truth, they would have to confront everything they've been avoiding inside their own soul. So instead of rising with you, they turned against you. Instead of walking beside your fire, they tried to extinguish it. And when they realized they couldn't control you, they left. But not silently. They left with accusations, with blame, with words designed to make you question your worth. That's how the enemy works. He doesn't need to destroy you physically. He only needs to convince you that your very essence makes you unlovable. That way, you do the damage to yourself. You isolate. You disconnect. You begin to believe the lie. And that's where the real danger begins. When the chosen one starts to think they're broken just because the world couldn't contain their truth. You need to understand this clearly. There's a massive difference between being unlovable and being unmanageable. And you, chosen one, were never meant to be managed. You were born to break systems, to disrupt generational patterns, to bring a kind of love that doesn't comfort egos, but confronts them. That's why they left. That's why they blamed you. Because loving you requires spiritual maturity. And most people are not ready for a love that requires them to evolve. They want comfort. You bring transformation. They want routine. You carry revelation. And that's not something everyone can handle. But that doesn't mean you're hard to love. It means you're hard to deceive. Think about how many times you've tried to dim your light just to be accepted. How many times you've second-guessed your intuition, softened your voice, or held back your truth just to keep the peace. And yet, the more you compromised yourself, the more disconnected you felt. That's because your spirit is not designed for performance. It's designed for alignment. And every time you betray your essence to be lovable, you lose pieces of your soul. And even then, the people you tried to impress still walked away. Why? Because they were never rejecting the version you edited. They were rejecting the original blueprint, the unfiltered, unshakable light of who you really are. This is how the enemy traps the chosen. He sends people who seem warm, but who are secretly threatened by your calling. He sends relationships that feel intense, but are rooted in emotional manipulation. He whispers through them, "You're too sensitive, too deep, too serious." But underneath that is one truth. You are too spiritually awake to be controlled. And instead of admitting their own limitations, they flip the narrative. They make your strength look like dysfunction, your discernment feel like paranoia, your boundaries seem like coldness. But here's what they won't tell you. They were never ready to love someone who refuses to be blind. You've been conditioned to carry guilt for simply being who you are, to apologize for not being easy, for not being simple, for not being silent. But your complexity is divine. Your intensity is holy. Your soul is multidimensional, and you weren't born to be digestible. You were born to awaken. And those who left you weren't capable of meeting you in your depth, so they left. And the enemy used that abandonment to reinforce the illusion. See, you're too much. But let me say this clearly. You're not too much. You were simply placed in rooms too small for the size of your spirit. And that is not your fault. That is divine separation at work. There's a holy reason why certain people couldn't stay in your life. It wasn't that they didn't care. Some of them truly tried. But the moment your presence started demanding truth, they couldn't breathe around you anymore. Because your light didn't flatter their wounds, it exposed them. Your soul didn't beg for validation. It revealed imbalance. And that made them feel unsafe, not because you harmed them, but because they weren't ready to heal. When someone's comfort is built on self-deception, even love can feel like an attack. That's why they said, "You're too much." But in truth, they meant, "I'm not ready for the level of truth you require." Let that sink in. Your energy was never too heavy. Their foundation was too shallow. And you spent years trying to take the blame for a discomfort that was never yours to carry. You internalized the rejection as a flaw, when in fact, it was spiritual misalignment. The vibration of your soul exposed the instability in theirs. You didn't repel love, you repelled illusions. And real love can never be threatened by the truth. In fact, it is built upon it. The love of God doesn't abandon, manipulate, or blame. It sees the flame in you and chooses to stay, even when it's uncomfortable. That's the kind of love your spirit was created for. Not the counterfeit versions that flee at the first sign of your fire. There's something else you need to hear. The ones who called you hard to love, many of them wanted to love you, but only under their conditions. They wanted access to your warmth, but not your depth. Your beauty, but not your intensity. Your presence, but not your purpose. They wanted your light to serve them, not awaken them. And when it didn't bend to their preferences, they turned it into a complaint. They didn't know what to do with someone who couldn't be manipulated. And instead of admitting their own fear, they labeled your truth as a flaw. That's not love. That's control wearing a mask of care. And so, over time, the enemy tried to weaponize your emotions against you. He sent people who triggered your deepest wounds, abandonment, unworthiness, loneliness, just to convince you that you'd be safer if you stayed small, that you'd be more loved if you were less discerning, that you'd finally be accepted if you silenced your gift. But that was a trap, because shrinking yourself for love is not love. It's spiritual captivity. And the longer you live in that cage, the more your purpose suffers. Because your mission as a chosen one requires your full light, not the version of you that makes everyone else comfortable. You are not here to be digestible. You're here to be undeniable. Your life was never meant to blend in. It was meant to break through. And yes, that means some people will walk away. Some will misread you. Some will even demonize you. But none of that changes the fact that your essence is a divine disruptor. And real love, the kind that comes from awakened souls, will not be afraid of your truth. It will crave it. It will rise to meet it. It will choose to grow beside it. Because that's what love is supposed to do. Not reduce your flame, but protect it. Not silence your spirit, but listen to it. Not label you too much, but say, finally, someone real. So now it's time to flip the script. No more apologizing for your frequency. No more softening your voice to be accepted. No more confusing rejection with failure. The people who couldn't handle you were not your audience. They were your training. They were the contrast you needed to remember that your love is not average. It's sacred, and it requires sacred capacity to receive it. You are not too powerful to be loved. You are so powerful that only love rooted in truth can stand next to you. That's not rejection. That's refinement. That's God separating what's false so that what's real can finally find you. And that love is coming, but not until you stop chasing the ones who fear your fire. You've been chosen to carry a different kind of presence, one that doesn't just hold people, but heals them, one that doesn't just attract attention, but activates destinies. And because of that, your path will look lonelier at times. But that loneliness is not punishment, it's preparation. Heaven is removing what cannot go with you. You are being emptied of what once affirmed you, so that you can finally be filled with what sustains you. Don't curse the space they left. It's sacred. It's where God is building something they were never meant to touch. They said you were cold, but they didn't see the fire you had to walk through just to protect your soul. They said you were too guarded, but they never asked what it cost you to survive the betrayals you didn't deserve. They only saw the outer strength, never the inner battles. Because people like you aren't handed peace. You're forged in storms. You don't just wake up with discernment. You earn it after being lied to, used, and misunderstood more times than you can count. And once you've seen the truth, you can't pretend anymore. That's why your love changed. That's why your heart got sharper. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped allowing your soul to be consumed by people who only wanted a piece of you, not the whole truth of who you are. That's the real reason they couldn't love you. Not because you lacked softness, but because your softness had boundaries. You were no longer available for spiritual vampires who called it connection. You no longer played small, so others could feel big. You no longer confused people-pleasing with compassion. And when you drew those lines, the very ones who benefited from your silence called it ego. But let's tell the truth here. They were never looking for love. They were looking for access. And when access was denied, they flipped the story. That's how the enemy works. He hides abuse under the language of love. But you're awake now, and awakened souls cannot be gaslit into guilt anymore. There's a sacred fire that lives inside you. It doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, but it burns through deception like nothing else. And when people encounter that, they either evolve or escape. There's no in-between. Because your presence doesn't tolerate half-truths, double standards, or emotional manipulation. That's what makes you rare, but also what makes you dangerous in a world built on illusions. And that's why they say you're too much. Not because you are, but because you disturb their spiritual sleep. And once someone has tasted your presence, they can't pretend anymore. They either rise or run. And those who ran, let them go. Their fear was not your fault. If you carry divine light, you will always awaken spiritual tension. That is not rejection. That is confirmation. Because the frequency of truth naturally exposes what's false, and not everyone is ready for exposure. So instead of growing, they label you. Instead of listening, they reject. Instead of honoring what they don't understand, they attack it. But don't take it personally. The battle was never between you and them. It was between your light and the spirits they weren't strong enough to confront. When they said, "You're too powerful to be loved," what they meant was, "I don't know how to love someone who doesn't need to be rescued." Let's be clear. Love is not supposed to be comfortable all the time. Real love disrupts. It reveals. It breaks cycles. It pulls things to the surface that we'd rather ignore. And when someone hasn't done the inner work, they'll mistake that kind of love for danger. They'll say you're controlling, when really, you're just clear. They'll say you're closed off, when really, you're just no longer emotionally available to chaos. You didn't become cold. You became aligned. And that alignment made you immune to the old traps. That's what scared them. Not that you were too much, but that they could no longer seduce you with half-love and hollow promises. And maybe you've cried over it. Maybe you've sat in silence wondering if you'll ever be fully seen, fully accepted, fully held, without needing to dim your essence. Maybe you even considered going back to the old version of you, the one who made it easier for others at the expense of yourself. But hear this clearly. That version of you is gone, and it's not coming back. Because you've come too far. You've sacrificed too much. You've learned to love yourself in places no one else stayed long enough to understand. And that self-love, that divine loyalty to your own spirit, is what makes you unstoppable now. So when they say, "You're hard to love," smile, because that's code for, "You can't be manipulated." That's code for, "You make me confront myself." That's code for, "Your truth reveals my lies." And if someone can't handle your truth, they're not your person. If they need you to shrink just to love you, that's not love. That's emotional dependency wearing a mask. Let it go. You're not here to be chosen by the masses. You're here to be recognized by the rare. And those who truly see you won't run. They'll rise with you. You were never meant to be loved by everyone. And that is not a flaw. It's a sign of your divine assignment. The chosen ones are not here to blend into the emotional comfort of this world. You are here to disrupt, to break chains, to awaken hearts that have been numb for too long. And that kind of presence cannot be embraced by people who are still addicted to lies. That's why your love doesn't always feel soft, because it was never meant to coddle. It was meant to cleanse. Your spirit carries a frequency that purifies, and purification is never gentle to what's impure. So instead of asking why they couldn't love you, ask why God preserved you from being entangled with what could have corrupted your path. You see, spiritual strength always demands spiritual responsibility. The moment you carry divine insight, you also carry the burden of clarity. You feel what others ignore. You sense what they deny. And you often know things they wish you didn't. That's why your presence feels threatening to the unawakened. Not because you expose them intentionally, but because your existence doesn't support their illusions. You didn't choose to be the revealer. You just chose not to lie. And for some, that's enough to label you dangerous. But hear me clearly. You are not dangerous. You are sacred. And anything that cannot honor the sacred will try to destroy it. But it didn't succeed, did it? Because despite the betrayal, the loneliness, the misunderstandings, you're still here, still standing, still growing, and maybe, finally, starting to see that all those rejections weren't rejections. They were redirections. Heaven didn't remove those people to punish you. Heaven removed them to protect what's inside you. Because your purpose is too important to be diluted by people who want your light but hate your boundaries. And now that you're seeing that clearly, something inside you is waking up. The version of you that used to beg for belonging, it's dying. And the version that walks with dignity is being born. Let that birth happen. Let the shedding continue. Let the grief pass through. Because yes, it hurts to be misunderstood. Yes, it hurts to be left behind. But that hurt has been cleansing your perception. You no longer see rejection as abandonment. You see it as a sacred filter, a divine sorting system, a line in the sand drawn by God Himself saying, "This one carries too much purpose to be entangled with the wrong flame." That's what you are, protected. Even when it looked like abandonment, even when it felt like loneliness, your isolation was never punishment. It was consecration. It was heaven preparing you for what requires purity. So now, you have a choice. You can either keep replaying the pain of being misunderstood, or you can let it be the proof of your calling. Because you were never misunderstood because you were broken. You were misunderstood because you're ahead of your time. Because you carry frequencies that don't fit in shallow places. Because your soul remembers things the world has forgotten. You are not too powerful to be loved. You are simply too aligned to be tolerated by what is false. And when you finally realize that, you will stop mourning who walked away and start celebrating what couldn't stay. The truth is, you never needed everyone to love you. You just needed to stop trying to convince people who were never meant to recognize you. The love you're waiting for will not require performance. It won't ask you to dim your light. It won't shrink in the presence of your truth. It will rise. It will see you. It will celebrate the very things others called too much. Because real love is not afraid of your fire. It wants to dance in it. And until that love finds you, you are being invited to become it, to embody the very love you were told you didn't deserve, to mirror back to yourself the depth, the purity, the truth that no one else knew how to handle. This is where it begins, not with the approval of others, not with being understood by the crowd, but with you, standing in the full truth of your essence, without apology, without shrinking, without trying to explain yourself to people who refuse to see. Because this is not about being loved by everyone. This is about being loved by the right ones, the ones whose spirit recognizes yours, the ones who won't be afraid when your light gets brighter, the ones who will say, "I see you, and I'm not going anywhere." That's the love your soul is worthy of, and nothing less. It took losing what wasn't real to make space for what is. And that's what most people don't understand about your journey. Your heartbreak wasn't just about a person. It was a sacred dismantling of all the lies you once believed about yourself. Every goodbye was a mirror breaking. Every silent treatment was a chain falling. Every "you're too much" was heaven whispering, "Not here, not them." You thought you were being rejected, but you were being recalibrated. Because you cannot walk in your full authority while still clinging to relationships that require you to self-abandon. You cannot embody divine love while still settling for emotional crumbs. Now, you're being called into your next season, the season of no longer proving, no longer chasing, no longer diluting. The time of asking permission to exist is over. This is the era of spiritual clarity, of heart-centered boundaries, of love that is rooted in truth, not tolerance. You've spent years trying to earn love by being less difficult, when in reality, you were never difficult, you were divine. And what you carry is not for the masses. It's for the few who are ready, the few who have been refined enough to recognize a soul like yours. And when that recognition happens, it won't feel like work. It will feel like coming home. So stop begging for room in places that were never built to hold you. You were not made for small talk, small love, or small faith. You were made to shake foundations, to rewire atmospheres, to speak truth where silence has kept people in bondage. That level of anointing will always be too much for people who benefit from illusion. But that's not your problem to solve. Your only job is to stay aligned, to keep your heart open, but your spirit discerning. To remember that your presence is not an inconvenience, it's a divine interruption. And those who reject it were simply not sent for your next chapter. You are no longer who you were when you tolerated their confusion. You've outgrown the cycle of making yourself small just to be loved by people who didn't love themselves. You've graduated from needing constant reassurance. Your silence now speaks louder than your old explanations, and your peace has become your power. That's what scares them. That's why they say you're too much, because you no longer need their validation to walk in truth. And when someone loses control over you, they often try to redefine you. But you don't need to defend yourself anymore. You only need to keep glowing, quietly, boldly, freely. Real love is not afraid of your depth. Real love doesn't call your boundaries selfish. It doesn't get intimidated when you speak with clarity. It doesn't punish you for growing. It grows with you. And if you've never seen that kind of love, don't lose faith. It's not because you're too much. It's because heaven has been protecting you from love that looks good, but poisons slow. You're not behind. You're not cursed. You're not impossible. You're holy. You're rare. And heaven is still working behind the scenes to align you with people who will not only love you, they will honor you. Because honor is the highest form of love. And when someone truly sees you, they won't flinch at your fire. They'll bow to the truth it carries. They won't run from your storm. They'll stand with you inside it. You weren't meant to walk this path with those who need you to be convenient. You're meant to walk with those who value truth more than comfort, who understand that your power is not a threat, it's a gift. And when those people come, you won't have to explain your soul. You won't have to shrink. You won't have to carry the weight alone. Because your love is not too much for them. It's exactly what they've been praying for. And while you wait, live like it's already yours. Speak like you're already heard. Love like you're already seen. Move like you're already chosen. Because you are. You don't need to prove anything anymore. The people who called you too powerful to be loved were never capable of loving themselves, let alone someone like you. Don't wear their projections like truth. Don't hold their fear like it belongs to you. You are not here to carry their limitations. You are here to break them. You are here to remind them, and yourself, that divine love starts with divine alignment. And you've already said yes to that. So from this moment forward, you are no longer available for distorted love. You are no longer accepting the role of too much. That title was never yours to carry. It was their way of making your depth feel like a burden, when it was always your brilliance. The more awakened you become, the more you realize, people who can't meet your truth will always try to mute it, but no more. You've outgrown the shrinking. You've outgrown the guilt. You've outgrown the illusion that says love requires self-abandonment. Love doesn't ask you to disappear. It asks you to stand. Fully, freely, faithfully. And if that truth resonates with your spirit right now, I want you to write in the comments, I will no longer shrink to be loved. Let it be a declaration, a signal to heaven, a boundary in the spirit. Let it echo through every layer of your being. You don't owe the world a softer version of yourself. You owe the truth of who you are to the mission God gave you. Because what you carry is not just about relationships. It's about spiritual alignment, generational liberation, and divine remembrance. You are not too much. You are the exact amount of light this world needs to wake up. If this message brought clarity to your soul, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Your voice, your presence here, your engagement, it all matters. We're building something sacred together. And if you'd like to support this mission and help us continue creating content like this, you can do so through Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the first pinned comment. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, to everyone who already supports. Your generosity allows this light to shine brighter every day. Before you go, I encourage you to watch the video on your screen right now. It will take you even deeper into this journey of awakening. Or visit the playlist and let your soul be reminded over and over again of the truth that no rejection can erase. You are chosen, you are powerful, and you are already enough. Don't stop here. Keep going. Keep healing. Keep rising. You are not alone, and you were never too much. You were just too real for a world still pretending. Remember this: anyone who tells you your power is too much is really saying, "I'm not ready for your truth." Let them go and walk boldly into the life that only the real you was born to live.